Welcome to Solving Politics, the only show on politics that provides answers to today's political problems and pathways to make them happen. When I started to write a script for our next program, I began it with a build-up to the damage done by big government programs. As I started to get into more details, I realized it needed a whole show entirely dedicated to what life is like for people on government programs and the sheer waste of money and destruction of human potential. So this show will be the introduction of how bad things really are for many people on government programs. This has been a very painful show for me to make because I worked inside these programs for many years. Part 2, which I'm looking much more forward to making, I'll be doing shortly, which will be about how to replace cradle-to-grave entitlements with cradle-to-grave web and app-based role models and mentoring from the youngest of ages, cutting spending by trillions and helping people on government programs 1,000 times better than what takes place now. Today, though, I'm going to be your personal tour guide and share with you my experiences, having worked inside government programs for many, many years. When you are on Section 8 and subsidized housing in the U.S., many tenants have their rents paid for life. For my tenants, it averaged 85% of their rent was paid for, and it was paid for life. Their utilities paid for life. Their water paid for life. Food came to them off of food stamps that they got, income from welfare, health care, long before Obamacare, was paid by stiffing hospitals. My average tenant had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical judgments against them. Most of them own cars. None I saw drove with auto insurance. You pay for that in higher collision and liability rates. One day I stopped and figured out what my average tenant got for making kids they could not afford to take care of and had little idea how to parent. It came to about $50,000 to $60,000 a year you would need to make pre-tax, what my tenants got in benefits. If you walked into their units, all of them had their big screen TVs, and they would spend the whole day in front of them. It was non-stop music videos and Jerry Springer. How long could you do that before you would completely lose your grip on reality? They were so depressed that they could not have cared less if they lost their housing and benefits. I had to physically drive some of them to the housing office so they would get their renewal paperwork in once a year. My tenants were turned into walking zombies. No people skills, no parenting skills, no job skills, no dietary skills, no relationship skills, and no coping skills. The tenant who struck me as having the most potential and drive I'd seen over the several hundred I got to know over the years died shortly thereafter of a drug overdose. If this program could take her down, they could take anybody down. She was far and away the strongest I'd ever come across. My tenants were the most miserable and unhappy people you could imagine. These programs destroyed their dignity. If they chose to work, their housing benefits got cut proportionately. Education was optional for them, not required as it should have been. 90 to 95% of the tenants I dealt with were either obese or morbidly obese. Their diet was mostly junk food and grease. I actually saw grease 3 inches thick caked on a pan once. The best explanation I ever heard was it was the same pan reused several times without being washed. There's your healthcare crisis in America, with this high a percentage of people obese or morbidly obese, and no dietary skills. It has ravaged the lower socioeconomic classes of society. Did you know that 7% of America is responsible for 70% of the healthcare bills in this country? The vast majority of tenants were single women, very few married ones. I know what you're thinking if you are on the right politically. Why don't they get married? Why don't they get into a nuclear family? By the way, it was usually a different father for each of their kids. Let me tell you what their idea of a nuclear family was. Getting pregnant by some felon out of prison. He'd beat them up, threaten their kids, deal drugs, get sent back to prison. You really want these women marrying these losers? Their kids didn't even stand a chance. Democrats like these programs because it keeps these people out of their rich left-wing neighborhoods. Plus, they get to feel good about themselves and pretend they're Mother Teresa. Republicans scream about how much they cost, then overfund them or do nothing. Republicans are just as bad with their stupid canned answers. Get in a nuclear family. Go become self-reliant. With not one national plan or program to make that happen. Could they be any more condescending? Doubt it. Well, guess what? We're in a time when app and web-based role models, cradle to grave, can start augmenting and then shortly after replacing government programs permanently, saving trillions of dollars and helping people 1,000 times better than any government programs. Stay tuned for part 2 when I go into this in full detail. By the way, I promise you it'll be much more pleasant to listen to. Well, thanks for hanging in till the end. I know this isn't pleasant, but you deserve to know what's going on. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of Solving Politics, the only show on politics anywhere with answers to today's political problems and pathways to make them happen.